Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. So, episode 6, the knifey-knifey, stabby-stabby episode of the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship. Let's talk about a few things there. I'm not going to show you any of the footage of this one. Instead, to reenact the events of what happened in episode 6, here is Jordan Chow.
Give it up for Boardmaster Wall.
In the previous episode, the zombie apocalypse survival themed one, I tore my PCL, or more specifically, a dude falling from the ceiling, climbing on the ceiling like Spider-Man, who slipped, fell off, landed on my head, Goomba stomped me on the head while my knee was locked out, tore my PCL. Essentially, do you know what a knee bar is? You know, where you're deliberately trying to tear the posterior cruciate ligament and bend the knee in the wrong direction. My knee was locked out. Dude falls on my head. I have the full force of a human being, boom, right on the head. I have this locked out knee. And yeah, tore the posterior cruciate ligament, the most difficult ligament in the knee to tear. I didn't know how bad the damage was. I just knew it was severe. It was difficult to walk. I remember the next day I went outside and tried to throw a kick at a heavy bag, and it was just searing, horrific, like electrical pain. Just, ooh. It's been bad this week. Some of you don't know that the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship happened a few months ago. I know some people are confused and they think it's happening live right now. No, this happened months ago. Instead of doing any sort of play-by-play on what happened in the episodes, because, spoiler alert, we all got stabbed a lot by the fake knives, I want to read some of the comments on this episode, because I noticed some themes of comments that keep coming up that are, how can I put this? Comments that keep introducing some silly but commonly held beliefs about knife fighting. So let's read some of them. This one, I assume this was meant to be a funny comment, but if this guy is serious, then ha ha ha, man. Okay, what about using the wall instead? Okay, I'm listening. What's your plan with the wall? Running to the wall. Climb it. Then build momentum to flip back or do spinning back kick or otherwise use Bruce Lee's side kick that may prevent the attacker comes near. That is my opinion. Your opinion is weird. If you can do that in real life, then you're amazing. Someone says, it looks hard wearing gloves in this challenge. I don't think the gloves really got in the way of the challenge. The helmet certainly did. If you didn't know, as I pointed out in every one of these reviews, I am visually impaired. I have a certain physical handicap. In my last professional fight, my opponent with loaded wraps punched a literal hole into my skull, damaging, well, my skull in multiple places. I have a depressed skull fracture here, hairline all the way up here, mostly blinded in one eye, and I've got a blind spot in the center. Wearing headgear cuts off my peripheral vision. That's how I see. That's how I guide myself throughout the world. So every one of these challenges that involved wearing the headgear, which was all of them except the sumo challenge on the beach and the zombie challenge, I was effectively blindfolded. So, yeah, knife fighting people when you can't see them is pretty hard. Knife fighting in general is pretty hard, man. So when you are given a handicap on top of that, it gets really, really difficult. Nay, impossible. So let's address some of these comments. The practical proof this exercise is total BS is because even in reality, people getting stabbed have like 5, 10, 15 wounds in a 2-minute fight. You never hear of people having 32 wounds in 20 seconds. All of this because the attacker have head and groin protection, so no fears of nothing. That is total BS. In reality, if you throw all you have, you can have your chances because the attacker will withdraw, and being hit with 1 or 2 good punches, he can't continue rushing in like that. I'm not a knife fighting expert. Not even a little bit. I don't claim to be. I have, however, read a lot of news reports regarding stabbing. And in stabbings, yes, you do in fact hear of people being stabbed 50, 60, 100, an excess of 100 times in a fight. We don't know how long those fights are because they didn't get recorded. They didn't get published on YouTube, and those people are dead. Now, here's an interesting question. Why is it that in these crimes of passion where people get stabbed 50 or 100 times, why are they being stabbed that much? Well, it's for the simple reason that people don't usually die right away when they get stabbed. You stab someone and they start fighting back and flipping out and, what are you doing? And screaming at you. And someone intent on murdering you will try to finish the job and stab you again and notice, oh, they're not dead yet. They're still fighting back. Stab them again. They're still screaming you. Stop screaming. Why won't you die? That's why. That is why we see 50 to 100 stab wounds. Anyway, so yes, we actually do see this thing that you say doesn't happen. That happens quite a bit. You can research this on the website of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI database. It's up there. The stats are up there about how people get killed. Man. So this is something I do pay attention to. How people die, man. Perhaps it's a morbid curiosity of mine, but it's something I do pay attention to. So, people who survive a knife fight, yeah, they're going to get stabbed less than the guy who gets stabbed 100 times. So the guy who survives, maybe he'll take 5, 10, 15 wounds and survive. But the guy who dies, yeah, he's probably going to get shanked 50, 60, 100 times. Here's another comment about all the protective gear. Sorry, but what's the point of fighting a knife wielder if he has a damned helmet and body armor? That is expletive deleted out. The entire way this is held is just non-realistic. Leave the attackers with only teeth protection and perhaps protective glasses for the eyes, and you'll see them getting knocked out or at least stopped from rushing. This is just nonsense. No one can go empty-handed against body-armored attackers. Okay, so I hated the protective equipment myself because it cut off my vision. Now, the other guys don't have, as far as I'm aware, are not legally blind, so they didn't have that same sort of issue. But this common theme that keeps coming up again and again in just dozens of these comments that I read, that if the attackers in this scenario were not wearing protective equipment, then we could have just punched them in the face and they would have been like, wah, wah, and run away like crying babies. Tell me you've never been in a fight without telling me you've never been in a fight. Additionally, if we're going to do that, if we are going to do that to make this more realistic, then why not just give the knife-wielding attackers an actual knife? That'll make it realistic, right? No. Probably the most unrealistic thing about this scenario is the fact that we knew that a knife-wielding attacker is coming in. He appears at the door brandishing the blade, essentially communicating with his body language, hey, I'm going to stab you now. And we're like, okay, I'm going to try to defend myself. Now, that's not how it happens. For all of his faults, for all of his wacky weirdness, Frank W. Dukes, you know, the guy that made all those crazy, wacky, fraudulent claims that produced the awesome movie Bloodsport back in 1989. He made a video. I don't have a link to it, but I did watch it a few years ago, where he talked about knife attacks. And he said perhaps the most intelligent thing I had ever heard on the internet about knife attacks. Yeah, I know, Frank Dukes, the guy who has all these crazy ideas about the Kumite and secret underground death fighting tournaments and whatever. Anyway, he had some legitimate advice about knife attacks, specifically how they happen. Attackers don't show it to you. They're going to step up on you. They're going to stab you where you don't see it. They're going to walk off. Or they're going to jump on you and stab you over and over and over again, but they're not going to advertise it. They're not going to show you the knife first. So if you want realism, we would deal with a prison shanking scenario where a guy walks by with a concealed shank and stabs you in the back 3 or 4 times, walks off. Or a bunch of dudes walk up and block your way, and one dude stabs you in the back and walks off, and you don't even know who did it. That would be realistic, man. Anyway, that's a comment that just keeps coming up. Take the armor off of the attackers, and then it'll be fair. Well, if we're going to do that and we want to make it fair, then somebody essentially has to die because we're dealing with actual knives at that point. And that would just be dumb. This next comment is archetypical of dozens of comments that I read. This guy says, I feel the biggest downfall was trying to wrestle, then in close quarters, keep your distance and control the hand. So a lot of people are saying, oh, they shouldn't have grappled with the other guys. Look, they were grappling with us. In every one of these scenarios, the knife-wielding attacker wanted to close the distance, grab you, usually with a collar tie, and shank you a bunch of times. From a dirty boxing clinch, man, that was their MO. We're in a very small room. Everyone keeps saying, keep your distance. What distance? There's no distance in this tiny room. It's a 3 by 4 meter room. You take one step back, you're up against a wall. You take one step forward, you're up against the knife-wielding attacker. You take one step to the side, he will square up with you immediately. So within that much time, you are in a grappling situation with these attackers in this scenario, as it played out. So how are you going to keep your distance? Some people suggested throw leg kicks. I actually did throw a leg kick. Now, I couldn't really see what was going on with this helmet on because it's blocking my peripheral vision, which is my vision. That's how I see. So I could vaguely make out if somebody was standing in front of me or not. I couldn't see details or anything. I did throw a leg kick. I don't remember if it landed, but when you throw a leg kick, essentially you are closing distance with a leg kick. It's not a big deterrent unless you throw a really, really heavy one. How do you believe you're going to keep distance in a tiny, tiny room? It reminded me a little bit of the first fight cage I ever fought in my first professional fight. It was affectionately nicknamed by the fighters the dog kennel because it was tiny. It was about, I don't remember the exact measurements, maybe 4 by 4 meters. Pretty small. You take 2 steps back and you're up against the wall. And so almost every single fight that happened in this fight cage, in this promotion, turned into a grappling scenario immediately because it's so small. As soon as you move, there's no room to run around, there's no room to dance, there's no room for evasive maneuvers with your footwork. And so it becomes a grappling situation by default. So it is patently silly for people to assume they have the room to move around in a tiny room like that. You simply don't have it. There were a number of comments berating Icy Mike, saying, oh, look, Icy Mike was talking about all his knife training, and look how useless that was. He got stabbed anyway. Yeah, he got stabbed anyway, in spite of having all this knife fighting experience, but you also have to take into mind how many times Mike got stabbed compared to, say, other people who have zero knife fighting training, such as myself. Mike got stabbed a lot less. Okay, so I got blinders on. I've got a bum knee. I can barely walk, let alone fight. At one point, my knee buckled underneath me. It's kind of odd. I think Rokas actually cut that part out, which is weird because they're only 20-second matches anyway, so why are we cutting pieces out of them? Anyway, my knee buckled, and it just gave way, and it was just horrific, searing pain. I remember some people are saying, why is Ramsey wrestling on the ground? He shouldn't wrestle on the ground. My knee buckled. I fell. And I was thinking in that moment, if this is an actual knife and I am being stabbed and cut, it's probably cutting nerves and tendons, and my body is probably going to make some involuntary reactions such as falling down. That's probably going to happen in a knife fight if you got stabbed and cut in your connective tissues. Another common comment was one like this: "That's not the way a knife works. Knives don't go in and out that easy. They get slippery when wet, etc., etc." So essentially, the marker is not a perfect amalgamation of a knife. Okay, that's a fair comment. But at the same time, what's a better way to do the drill? I don't know. Again, I'm not a knife fighting expert, so a lot of people have critiqued that specific aspect of the marker drill. It's a popular drill in self-defense schools. I've seen a lot of people do it before. Yeah, there are some problems. The marker is shorter. Essentially, you're stabbing with the handle rather than an actual blade, so there's a distance issue. There is the issue of pulling the knife out and pushing the knife in, depending on the sharpness of the knife, the length of the knife, whether you hit bone or something like that. Sure, yeah, it's not a perfect amalgamation. It's not a perfect representation. I don't know what would be a perfect representation that would still be safe. This is something you can do safely. No, it's not perfect. No, it's not going to... Not every stab wound is going to be fatal because it might not get deep enough or might not be hard enough or might actually get snagged on the clothing or something like that. But it tells you you are within range of the knife, so at least there's that. It's not an completely imperfect or useless drill either. Probably the most important takeaway from this, according to a lot of the comments I read, a lot of people were very surprised that knife fighting is hard. People who've never done any sort of knife fighting drill at all, where they attempted to disarm somebody attempting to stab them multiple times. It's hard, man. It's hard. I mean, we do a lot of stabby-stabby jokes on my channel with Jordan Chow going also in machine style on people. But if you try to take a knife away from Jordan, you're gonna get poked with that knife a whole bunch of times. It's just the way it is. If you give a knife to someone who isn't even a good athlete, someone who isn't even a specialist in knife fighting, it's a dangerous weapon, man. If they got a sharp blade and the willingness to use it, that's a problem, man. That's a real problem. So one good thing about this episode, it is opening a lot of eyes from people who were completely ignorant about how knife fights work and realize knives don't run out of ammo. It doesn't require a great deal of special training. It's a force multiplier, so you can beat experienced martial artists if you have a knife and they don't have one, man. It makes that a whole lot easier. So knives are very, very dangerous weapons. It's funny that in the movies they often get downplayed as a minor inconvenience to the hero when the bad guy pulls out a knife, but yeah, very, very scary, dangerous weapons. Why did I say I hated every minute of it? That wasn't a joke. I was being 100% serious when I said that. And it wasn't just because, the headgear blinded me and it sucks to fight with an injured knee, which it does, and this made it worse and all of that. Yeah, all of that was bad, and maybe I'll harp on that later some more for fun. But the reason I hated everything about this drill is because of what it represented. Because I've seen people die. Back in the 90s, I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I spent 2 years mostly in the slums, the Villas de Miseria. And I was doing missionary work there. I saw people die. I saw people killed right in front of me. I saw people shot to death. I saw people stabbed. I saw people executed. There was so much violence in these villas. So much crime. People killing each other over drugs and pitiable amounts of money. And this kind of triggered a little bit of PTSD, if you will. Just like I remember as these guys were running in, psyching themselves out, stabbing and stuff, it brought back some memories of those experiences that I don't like to think about, And the fact that we live in a world where that happens is... It can be difficult to cope with, man. Bad guys jumping out of the shadows with a knife and shanking you, that's, as far as ways to die, it's pretty far down on the list. Most deaths on this planet happen due to heart disease, after that stroke, after that a few diseases like cancer and pulmonary infections, basically colds, pneumonia, that sort of thing. And we have a dozen or so diseases which often are fairly preventable with a healthy lifestyle, diet, exercise, things like that. And I made a video about this, how the real self-defense is take care of yourself, take care of other people. Don't spend your life stressing out about ninjas jumping out of the shadows and shanking you. The amount of hate, the amount of absolute hate and human disconnect that I saw, that I witnessed firsthand when I saw those murders. It wasn't so much the blood, it wasn't so much the violence, it was the complete human disconnect where they essentially unplugged from their humanity and became something else, something worse, something unspeakable. Something dark, just pure evil, personified in the flesh. And I hate that so much. So yeah, this challenge took me back there a bit. I went first in this challenge because I was going to meet up with a friend, a former student of mine. We went out, had a great dinner, had a great time, caught up, reminisced. It was awesome. It was awesome being able to meet up with some of my former students who live in Australia. And that was such a stark contrast from this dark, depressing mood that this challenge put me in. Going from like, PTSD flashbacks of just pure evil incarnate, which I have witnessed, back to, let's go have a good time with my friends. Man, it was strange, man, it was strange. Here's another comment a few people have left, something like this. Maybe have the guy they are going against with the knife not be an MMA fighter. 2. LOL, it would be more realistic for us average folks to see how they do versus normal people. These guys weren't MMA fighters. They train at Western Combatives, which is a self-defense school. They do some striking, they do some grappling, but they're not MMA fighters. They're not professionals. They're not high-level guys. They know how to punch and kick and wrestle a little bit, but again, these aren't high-level pros. These are aggressive, strong, big dudes with knives, and that's a deadly enough combination, man. A regular guy with a knife is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare, if he has the willingness to use it. A strong guy with a knife who can thwart your attempts to overpower his control over that knife, yeah, sure, that makes it harder. But I think the whole point of the challenge is it's a challenge. It's supposed to be difficult. So I don't see anything wrong with a challenge being difficult. But this is a comment that comes up a lot. Here's another comment objecting to the headgear and the other protective gear the knife attackers were wearing, but he does bring up a salient point here. He says they should have tried to calculate the damage on the attacker too. Okay, that's an interesting point. If they calculated the amount of damage on the attacker. Now, what I was told... What I remember before we went into this knife attack thing, I wasn't really paying attention because I honestly didn't care at this point. I'm like, man, my knee is messed up. This is probably going to make it worse. I'll take one for the team and do it for the show, but whatever. Anyway, what I remember them saying was that they would score it based on whoever had less stab marks would equal more points. Maybe it was more complex than that. But that was the gist of it. Less stab wounds would equal more points. And that seemed fair, because I figured everybody will get stabbed a lot, and I'll probably get stabbed the most because I have no idea what I'm doing in a knife fighting scenario. And I'm injured and blind here, so I'm probably going to be turned into a pincushion, whatever. But that they should have tried to calculate the damage on the attacker too, that's a very fair point. Because if you look at a guy like, say, Matt, for example, he got some nice knees on the attackers, did really well with a reverse collar tie, and some knees there. So if we're calculating damage, Matt would have done quite a bit of damage on the attackers. Would it be enough to stop him? Would it have been actual stopping force? We don't know. That's one of the great uncertainties about striking. You don't know how the other guy's going to react when you hit them. It might just make them angry and make them want to hurt you more. You might get lucky and knock them out. You might have a guy with a thicker skull and hit him and break your hand. You don't know. You might wobble him a bit. It might do nothing. I was a professional fighter in 5 different combat sports for about 10 years. Mixed martial arts, kickboxing, Sanda, K1 style kickboxing, Muay Thai. A lot of striking sports. And I had fights where I threw everything at the other guy. Landed flush, like right there, right on the neck, right on the knockout spot, and it didn't do anything. And I had fights where I just sort of boom, tapped the guy with my foot and he toppled over. It's weird, man. I've had fights where, you throw everything at the midsection and he just eats it like it's nothing. And I've had fights where, boom, a little nothing shovel hook connects right with the liver and boom, the dude collapses into a mess and starts vomiting in the middle of the ring. That did happen to me once. Shovel hooks and a shin across the rib cage. Round 2, dude starts throwing up on the mat, man. But that doesn't always happen. I've done the same exact thing in other fights where it had zero observable effect on my opponents. People are just built differently from each other. I mean, we're all the same species, but there are so many variables in striking that we can't really say, oh, this punch against this guy will have the exact same result as the same punch against that guy. It won't be the same punch in the same scenario. It's not the same scenario. So we could calculate how many punches or kicks or knees or takedowns or whatever that we do against the knife guys, but we can't honestly calculate the damage that the attackers would supposedly be taking. It's just not possible. So having a knife basically makes you better than John Jones, says another comment. Well, more dangerous than John Jones? Heck yeah, man. Having a knife and the willingness to use it makes you a very capable murderer. So yeah, it's dangerous, man. Deadly. Deadly. Another comment, the best way to win versus a knife is a one-punch KO or head kick to the jaw. Tell me you've never been in a fight without telling me you've never been in a fight. The one-punch KO is the dream, man. That's the exception, not the norm. That's what every fighter wants on their highlight reel, but it rarely happens. It's possible, it's not probable. He goes on to say, wrestling is just suicide. Well, look, once again, in that small room, 3x4, with a guy who is intent on grabbing you, you are going to end up in a grappling situation. It is inevitable. There was a foam cylinder placed in the center of the room during one of the fights, or whatever we're going to call these things. And a bunch of people in the comments said, why didn't they just pick it up and use it as a weapon or a shield? And, well, the center of the room, it's equidistant from you and the attacker. You rush toward the thing, the attacker rushes toward the thing, you're both next to the thing. It's going to take you longer to pick up this object than it will take for the guy to stab you. In the case with Rokas, when he thought about grabbing the thing, the guy kicked the thing out of the way. This foam cylinder was pretty large and unwieldy and pretty light. It would have made a terrible weapon, and trying to pick it up, it would have been easy to swat out of the hands. Yeah, I think more than anything, it was there as a distraction. This comment from Living Room Rock TM8992 is pretty similar to a number of other comments I read here. Basically a disparaging comment about me. Ramsey Dewey, the world's most fraudulent YouTube martial arts spokesperson. Interesting. So a lot of people basically wrote a comment saying, this exposes Ramsey Dewey as a fraud. This tells me you haven't been paying attention, man. I'm an MMA coach. That is my job. That is my sole thing that I do. I coach the sport of mixed martial arts. I coach cage fighters. That's it. I don't teach knife fighting. I teach people don't get into knife fights on my YouTube channel. If you've seen any of these videos with Jordan Chow, you should know what I think about knife fighting, man. You're going to get stabbed. You're going to get cut. I've said that many times on this channel when people ask me about knife fighting. How is that fraudulent? Guess what? It's not. I told you the honest truth. You get in a knife fight, you're going to get cut. That will simply happen. All of these idiots in the comments, just absolute idiots, outing themselves as such, saying that a knife fighting drill is exposing me. It's interesting because I remember Rokas was asking everybody, all of the participants, like what our profession is. And I wrote down, I'm an MMA coach. I coach the sport of MMA. That's my job. Everybody else wrote down YouTuber. And that was interesting to me. I thought, okay, I guess that makes sense. It kind of surprised me that Icy Mike wrote down YouTuber because he does run a gym. So I thought he might write down like martial arts instructor / YouTuber, but he simply wrote YouTuber. And I thought that's interesting to me that that's the predominant thing that he identifies with. And Jeff Chan also, I thought maybe he would write like fighter or trainer or coach or something like that. He wears a number of hats like most people do, but he also wrote down YouTuber. I thought, oh, okay. Everybody considers themselves principally a YouTuber, except for me. I never considered myself a YouTuber, ever. I've been making YouTube videos for about 17 years, since YouTube was pretty new. And yeah, man, I've made videos about my work as a martial arts instructor, as an MMA coach. But I've never once considered myself a YouTuber. I wonder what would happen if I did, as far as my YouTube channel is concerned. If I started taking YouTube seriously, what would happen? Maybe we should give that a try. Take YouTube seriously for a change. This comment says, there are some factors that take away from reality a little. The contestants obviously are not allowed to use full strength to damage the attackers. I believe in real life, had Ramsey's kick been at full force and speed, it would have been enough to push the attacker away or to the ground, allowing for a window of more possibilities to defend yourself. I do remember I opened up with a front kick. My intention was to push the guy away. That was a mistake specifically because it further exacerbated the damage to my PCL, the torn ligament in my knee. That hurt a lot. I was the one who ended up feeling all the pain right there. It pushed the guy away maybe 2 feet and he ran right back in. So if I threw that kick super hard and just blasted him and all this, maybe. But I was in no condition to compete in this particular challenge. This just made it worse in every way. So that sucked. My knee hurts really, really bad right now. Like so bad. One thing I said in the post-fight interview, I noticed a number of the people in the comments are commenting on, was that I said, if I had used any combat sports strategy instead of what I actually did, I would have been stabbed, but I would have been stabbed less. And I believe this is absolutely true. What did I actually do? I tried to grab the knife hand and pin it up against the wall or up against his body. And The guy would do the old switcheroo and stab, 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 and so on. Trying to control a knife hand in general is difficult. Trying to control a knife hand when you can't actually see what's going on, when you're blind and injured and so on, is exponentially harder. If I was able to do this without the headgear, yeah, this would have been game-changing. If I was able to do it without an injured knee, it would have been game-changing, but I probably still would have received 0 points, even if I had implemented a combat sports strategy. Here's what I mean by that. Here's what I mean by a combat sports strategy. If I had simply attempted to box with the guy, just punch him in the face, do damage with my fists as many times as I could, I still would have been stabbed, but I would have been stabbed less. If I had committed to wrestling with the guy, taking him down, pinning him, I still would have been stabbed, but I would have been stabbed less. If I had pulled guard on the guy, IBJJF competition style, and then attempted to armbar or triangle choke him, I still would have been stabbed, but I would have been stabbed less than what I did, which was trying to grab and control the knife hand and push it against his body or push it against the wall, basically push it out of the way. Another question that comes up, since these were 20-second matches, what happens after 20 seconds? If this is preparing us for a real-life situation, what happens after 20 seconds? Does help arrive? Maybe. I don't know. Because if not, you're dead anyway. Here's another comment about Icy Mike. There were quite a few, quoting Icy Mike, where he said, I did about 70 hours of coursework in knife defense with some of the best defense or knife defense instructors in America. Shuck, 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 shuck. A bunch of knife sounds, and then ha, 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 ha. Little jab at Mike right there. I know a lot of people thought it was funny that Mike talked about his knife defense training and then took a bunch of fake stab wounds. I guess their expectation was Mike wouldn't get stabbed at all. Look, how many times would Mike have been stabbed if he had 0 knife fighting training? Probably a lot more, I'm guessing. Like I said before, if you go into a scenario like this committed to an offensive strategy, you're going to get stabbed, but probably stabbed less than if you just randomly glom onto the arm and hope for the best. So this was honestly the most depressing episode of the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship for me, for personal reasons. And yeah, I hated every minute of it. I didn't enjoy watching the episode because of what all those stabby things represent in real life. But at the same time, it is an important message for people who are completely oblivious that knives are super dangerous and you shouldn't get into a knife fight. It's important this message has reached some of those guys. So, well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.